Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the podcast. My name is Bella and we're here for another week, which is very exciting because we have a different layout today. Today we are at home. This feels a bit far away. I think this feels more fun. Okay, I'm just going to sit like this and maybe I'll regret this in the future, but we're here now. Welcome to this week's episode of the podcast. I'm so excited that you're here and I'm so excited that we get to chat. And I'm so excited that we get to have a little update because this week has been, I dare say, a perfect week. I've been home for the week and I knew last week when it was my last week at work, I was like, is it going to be a bit weird to stay at Manchester for when I don't have a job and I'm going to feel really unsettled? And I kind of knew I would feel really unsettled. And so I decided to come back to Scarborough, have a little break, do some job applications from here, kind of prep myself. So it just felt like the chapters changed because now I'm going back to Manchester and I'm used to not, it's not so much that I'm used to having my routine there. It feels less like, unsettling because I've had a bit of a break from it. And I think that's the thing that I knew I needed was having that bit of a break. And a thing I talk about a lot on the podcast, and I think is something that is important to me, is a changing of chapters. It's having different environments for different sections of my life. And I really see my life a lot like chapters. And I know I've been saying this on the weekly vlogs, daily vlogs actually. We've been doing really well on the daily vlog front. But I find it a lot easier to kind of cope with change when I can associate it with like a scenario and an environment that I'm in. And by changing that, I'm kind of really acknowledging that I'm going through a change period. And I think it really helps me just acknowledge how many things are going on and how makes me feel a bit more centered in myself, which sounds weird to like need to leave the situation that you're currently in to recognize that change is happening. But I think it's kind of makes sense that I felt like in this moment where a lot of change was happening, I needed to come home again. And this is why I'm so glad that I moved from London and have the opportunity to come home. And I know that is really lucky because a lot of people don't. But being able to come home and spend time with my family and like see my grandparents and just spend time here doing a lot of the things that I do really enjoy doing here. I've spent so much time on walks. I've done so much running. It's just been really lovely. It's just been really lovely. And I think the more I come back, the more I understand why my parents moved here. Because I think when you're growing up, you really question a lot of things. I could always be like, why did they move back from London? It would have been so much fun to grow up there. And now I live in a city and I think about the reality of like bringing a child up in a city. I don't know how some parents did it. Like when I was a nanny, that was really intense. It was hard. Like it was a difficult, it's difficult. And I can now so clearly understand, you've got the wide open, like you've got the beach to go play on for free. You've got the parks to go in for free. You've got so many outdoor things here which are free. Coming home has felt very calming and I feel in so much of a better headspace than before I left. And I wasn't even in a particularly bad one, but I feel a lot more grounded with what's going on. I feel a lot more just, we're doing all right. But before I want to get on to the next part of the podcast, I just want to say if you enjoy You've Got Mail, if you enjoy the content that I produce or you enjoy the things that I create, if you could just share it to one person that you also think would really enjoy it, we could double our listenership. And then that would mean that You've Got Mail could get bigger and bigger and bigger. And that would be really exciting. And so if you could, just take 2 minutes, not even 2 minutes, 20 seconds to press the little share button. And it makes a massive, massive difference to me. But anyway, but onto the content part of this week's podcast. And the content part of this week's podcast, you know, it's really linked to the Instagram post that I just posted about my favorite bench packs. And this feels like a weird thing to talk about. And I don't know I think I've seen them in Central Park too, but where I live, we live at the beach and there's loads of benches and you could dedicate the bench to someone that you love. And I was walking along the forefront yesterday and I was reading the bench plaques and so many of them were so beautiful. And it just made me think a lot about love and a lot about loss and a lot about the different people in our lives and a lot about the value that we place on different achievements and how really, you know, something that is so, so important is the relationship that we have with others and the impact that we have on others. As a person, the way that we react has an impact on the people around us. And I think quite often in the environment that we live in, we can rush a lot because time feels very precious. And I think, if anything, having these last couple of days of not having a job and having so much more time, it's made me realize how much I have been rushing, how much I felt like I didn't have time for anything, how I felt like I didn't have time to visit my grandparents and I didn't have time to go for a walk and I didn't have time to stop and read the signs. And I was running along and I was like, you know what? I've always wanted to read them. Why don't I just stop? And I was running and I was like, you know what? I fancy going a bit further. Why not? And I kept asking myself, like, why not? You want to read the signs? Why don't you just read them? It's not that deep. If you want to carry on running a bit, why don't you just read them? You have time. And it's made me think about how I want to implicate this mindset into my life when I do have a job and I do become busier. Because I think it's in these moments of calm, these moments where we don't have so much pressure on us, where we don't have so much intensity, that we can really evaluate the things that are important to us and the things that bring us joy. And we can evaluate ways that we can bring everyday joy into our lives. And one, like another one is, another point that I wanted to chat about is, that audio is it's this kid, and they, when like people go up to people and they like ask for advice, things like that, and it's in a kindergarten, I think, and they're just asking like advice from the kids, and he says, you can't control the wind, but you can adjust the sails. And I've really thought about it a lot, especially this week where obviously like I don't have a job and I'm trying to be like stay productive, stay active, stay like in a happy mindset, making sure that I'm feeling like positive, because I know that's something that I have control over and will make this experience better, is me having a positive mindset. I think we also have the ability to adjust the sails on the way that we experience stress, and that's so much easier said than done. And I'm not, when you have a really stressful day, sometimes you can't adjust the sails. Sometimes you're just having a really stressful time of it. But I think there is the propensity that stress can become all consuming, and with stress becoming all consuming, we lose focus of the things that really matter. And I think bringing this back to the benches, it's like I was walking around and reading these benches, and like some of them are just absolutely like, let me read this one to you. To the world, you may have been one person, but to me, you are the world. Now, peace, perfect peace, my darling. This was Michael's favourite view. Think of him, he thought of you. Devoted wife, mum, and grandma, forever in our hearts, you made our lives complete. Together again, enjoying the view. Please sit and enjoy it too. Do you know all of these things that are in there? What seems to be the key thing is, taking a moment, not rushing, appreciating the little things, appreciating, the everyday beauty and the things we have around us. And I think that really impacts the way that we adjust our sails. That we, oh God, I don't mean to cry. I'm trying not to cry because I just find it really emotional. I just think it's so, do you know what it is? I find it so important. If there's anything you get from this podcast, I really, really hope you just learn to value the truly important things. Hug your family and your friends tightly. Tell people you love them. Don't stress the small stuff. I just want this podcast, if it gives you anything, I just want you to give it a newfound appreciation for the very small things in life that make up the everyday joys that make up this life that we live. Because I think the way that our society is kind of programmed is that we celebrate the big achievements, we celebrate the birthdays, the graduations, the promotions, we celebrate these things, these milestones, because it would feel too much to have a card every single day. But I think we should have a card every single day, because these lives that we're living are like little miracles, Like you are made from a star. You are made from a star. It's like a little miracle day. Like, can you just like comprehend the fact that everyone around us is made from stardust? Like, that is crazy to me that we are all made of stardust. And yet it's so easy to forget like the exceptionalness in the everyday when we are working and doing so many hours and it feels stressed and we feel bogged down. It's really hard then to establish our priorities. And I know right now I'm in a privileged position with my time. Okay. I'm just doing the podcast day in, day out for like 8 hours a day. I can't lie. It's turning into a bit of a full time career move at the moment without the benefits of a career, but I'm enjoying it. And so that's all that matters. But being able to have this time has really emphasized to me how important it is to have that real focus on the things that you truly enjoy. And that's why I want this podcast really for you to take away and think about how you spend your time. I've realized I've been spending so much time scrolling on my phone doing things that don't bring me joy. And sometimes a little scroll is important because, it gives us a little mental break about everything that's going on, and that's fine. I'm not here to beat you up about scrolling, we all do it. It's okay. We'll get over it. It's not the end of the world. But I do really, really think that I just want everyone to have a little bit more of appreciation for like the really tiny things that feel so stupid and silly to celebrate, but it's those tiny little things that make up our lives. And I think it's through appreciating those tiny little things that, when life gets hard, we can adjust the sails. Because when I was on my run, and I wrote something about this on TikTok, and I feel like I will probably post on Instagram, I saw this little boat. It probably wasn't a little boat, it probably was a big boat. I just couldn't really see it because it was very far away. And it had a light on the top of it. and the light on the top was shining so much more brightly because it had such dark clouds surrounding it. And it made me think about how often, even in the darkest of times, we see good, and how that good feels even greater because of how much dark is surrounding it. And it made me really think about the importance of, in moments when things aren't going to plan, and we are having hard times, when things are, upsetting things have happened, how important it is to cling on to that light, to find the good things. And it's not to say to not feel the bad things, I'm not saying push it down. What I'm saying is, I'm not saying to not acknowledge the bad things. What I'm saying is to try and find the light. And I read this quote by Martin Luther King, and it wasn't, related to this, but it said, light drives out darkness. I'd never really thought about it before like that. And I know it feels like an obvious thing to say, like, obviously you turn on the light and it gets rid of the dark, but I've never thought of the light driving out darkness. And I think when we're having hard times, when things aren't going to plan, when we are just struggling, it's clinging onto that light that makes us carry on. It's clinging onto that light that makes things good. It's finding the joy in the everyday things that makes us feel happy, that can bring just a little bit of joy. And I think joy encourages joy. I think positive thinking encourages positive thinking. I think once you start noticing good things, it becomes easier to notice good things. Our brains are like patterns. It's no surprise that once we start focusing on more positive things, we notice more positive things and we become a more positive person. And I think by inciting more positive change into our lives, we can incite more positive change into the environment that we are in. And that is really exciting and just makes you feel so empowered with the world that you could live in, the environment that you could create, knowing that by focusing on more of the good things and the good things, this will attract more of the good things and the good things, and it'll all follow on. Now, I'm not totally naive to know that, there are some situations where this is not, sometimes bad things do happen, really upsetting things, and, good thinking is not going to encourage more good thinking. But I think there is always some element of good in something, whether that's the kindness of a friend, the patience of a parent, whether it's just, realizing a stranger was there for you and it just showed you the goodness in strangers. There is always a tiniest part of good in a day, even if it doesn't feel like it. And so I guess I want from you this podcast for you to realize, just take a breath. Because I think all of those bench plaques, what they made me realize is, A, to celebrate the love that we have for each other. Hug the people that we love tightly, because we're not going to be here forever. And we really think we are. I think especially in our 20s, we assume that we're going to be here for the next 100 years. That would be crazy for all hits till we're 120, but we assume we're going to be here for that amount of time, and we don't have any confirmation. But it's too scary to think about the fact that we don't have confirmation about that it's not certain, so we assume that it is. But I think in assuming that it is, we just can sometimes get bogged down in the everyday mundality of our mundality, is that the word? The everyday mundane, monotonous tasks that we have. And we can lose the excitement in doing things that are different. And I think we get appreciation for the little things in our lives when we mix it up a little bit. When we don't have such a structured plan, when we allow ourselves to have a moment, when we allow ourselves time to breathe and just appreciate and have time to appreciate. So I think that's where appreciation comes from, You've got to have time to appreciate things. You've got to give yourself a chance to notice what's going on. I think that's important. And so I guess from this podcast episode this next week, I want you to take more time. I want you to take time and appreciate the things around you. I want you to take time to appreciate your friends and your family and your loved ones. I want you to take time to appreciate the good points in this week. I just want you to give yourself 10 minutes of that time, because good attracts good and positive change incites positive change, and the cycle continues. And over again, this will create a more positive environment for you. And it will also, I think, adjust your sails. Because for someone who's realized you really can't control the wind, but adjusting your sails can make a big difference. It can give you that control back, and it can make you so much better and more likely to adapt to the situation that you're in, to move it into a positive direction that empowers you. But anyway, on to the question part of this week's podcast. When it comes to, you can be in my vlog. Put your head in. Come on, confidence, yes. I'm meant to, yes. Do you have anything? Wait. Do you have anything you'd like to say on this? The first question is how to think that you are worth it. I think, okay, the way to think you are worth it, let's get a piece of paper out. and write out all of the things you have achieved, all the things that you think are valuable that you've done. I want you to write out every single one. They don't have to be big things. They could be little things like went on a walk when I really didn't want to. It shows you're determined. You know, cared for my sibling when they were sick shows you're caring. Shows you think of others. You know, bought someone this from the shop because I knew they'd like it. Shows that you're selfless. And I think all these little good parts that make up your character and your personality, you need to start to realize them. You need to start to pinpoint them. You need to start giving them value. You need to start realizing that they make up you, that they make up you. And so I think you start to think that you are worth it when you realize all of the good that you are, when you realize how much you bring to something, when you realize that you are a good person who brings value into the thing that you're involved in. And so it's easy to just dismiss who you are and think you're, not worthy and not worth the things, but this is your life. And I think next week's podcast will be really good. We're going to talk a lot more about realizing that you're limitless, not placing limits on yourself. And I think that podcast will be really good. But I think you begin to think you're worth it when you truly, truly realize that you are. You're made of stardust, right? So if anything, that's a solid start of why you're worth it, because you're literally made out of stars. Okay. But I think maybe more actionable advice would be maybe not a list, maybe a little, spider diagram type thing. But start realizing all of the great parts that make up who you are. Start noticing them. Start clocking onto them. And once you start that again, positive change invites positive change. You'll start realizing there's more and more things, and you'll start giving them value. You'll start realizing how important it is to celebrate you. Because there's no one else like you in the world. There is no one else like you. You are the only version of you here. That's why you're here, and that's why you will always bring a unique perspective, experience, and skill set to something that you apply to. And that is why you are worth it. Because if everyone else is worth it, then so are you. Because everyone is bringing something unique. You just need to realize it. Do you think your overall job performance and understanding of yourself has improved since your ADHD diagnosis? I went on the You Found Her podcast a couple of days ago, and we talk a lot more about ADHD. And it's something that I've done a little YouTube video about. And so if you check my YouTube, there's definitely more info on being diagnosed with ADHD there. I think getting a diagnosis is weird because you suddenly have a label to put on things. And I think the label can both be clarifying, I guess, provides you that understanding of why you might react a certain way, why you struggle with certain things, why you find things harder than others, why you are better at certain things than other people. It makes sense of things. But also, once you've got a label, you can't unassign yourself a label. And there are a lot of stereotypes that are associated with labels. So sometimes I think getting a diagnosis can feel like a negative thing. I'm not saying it is a negative thing, but it can feel like it, especially at first. And so I think it's helped me be kinder to myself. It's given me another level of understanding about who I am. And I think it gives you, sometimes I kind of felt like I wondered if it gave me permission to understand who I was. It gave me permission about understanding the type of personality I was and the things I was good at. And it made me not feel so guilty for being bad at certain things. It made me be a lot more compassionate to myself and really understand that when I'm trying my best, I don't have to be perfect. That's okay, because no one is really perfect. But I think I would always beat myself up for not being perfect because I couldn't understand why. And so for some reason, getting a diagnosis, I was like, oh, well, that's why. Now it makes sense. But there was a lot of, you know, it is also hard getting a diagnosis and realizing that, there's many years of your life that went by where you were struggling with this thing and you didn't get help. And if you'd have got help, you might have found it a lot easier. And so I think being diagnosed with ADHD has helped my overall performance, especially because there's a lot of workplace considerations that can be met when you do have a diagnosis. You can get, what's it called? It's not called like an operational health assessment. So you can get someone will come into your work environment and work out how they can make that better for you and work out reasonable adjustments that will make it so it's an equal workplace for you to function in, which can be really helpful. So yes, diagnosis can really help your overall performance at work, but I think it's not saying it fixes everything. It doesn't fix everything, but I think personally I found having a diagnosis to be really beneficial. But again, I cannot speak for everyone on it. It's just my own experiences. But anyway, I need to go because I have to catch my train. Look, it's 15:54 and My train is in less than an hour and I haven't packed yet. And so we've got to go. But if you've enjoyed this episode, make sure you share it to one person so we can grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. Because if you all did it, I'd be in the 1,000 mark for listeners, and that would make my day. Make my day. Because then I can pitch myself to podcast networks. Okay. So if you want to help me out, please share it to one other person. Do a little review. Do a little 5-star tap if you can. But anyway, make sure you are following me on Mail from Bella at Instagram and on TikTok and on YouTube. I've really aligned everything. And I will speak to you again next week. I love you loads. Thanks for listening. Bye.